The lodger. It's always night. And for children, night is a time for monsters hiding in the dark, in the closet, under the bed. For adults, night is loneliness, unspoken anxieties. But for Leo, night was the only time he truly felt close to his son Alex. 7 years. 7 years of just the two of them. Leo had learned to love every dent in the ceiling of Alex's room, every scratch on the hardwood floor. He knew every sound of the old house, the creak of the floorboards underfoot, the sigh of wind through the window frames. He knew Alex so well he could predict whether his son would be lying on his side or on his back. "Are you okay, buddy?" It was a familiar phrase, a question just for the two of them. But tonight, something was off. Alex lay in bed, the blanket pulled up to his chin. Only his head was visible, and a smile that was too wide. It stretched from one corner of his mouth to the other. It wasn't the innocent, carefree smile of a child. It was forced. Leo stood in the doorway, the weak glow of the blue nightlight casting a faint light on his son's face. Alex's eyes were still clear, still his familiar brown. But that smile, it made everything feel foreign. Alex gave a slow nod, the smile never faltering. "Dad, can you check for monsters under my bed?" Leo let out a nervous chuckle, trying to hide his unease. This was an unusual request. Alex had never been afraid of monsters under the bed. His fears were always something formless, a strange noise from the back of the closet, a shadow that moved on the wall, not a classic monster. He knelt down, his back to the bed. The smell of old dust and damp wood filled his nostrils. He peered into the dark, narrow space. He'd done this 100 times, and he always knew there would be nothing there. Just a routine, a reassurance so Alex could sleep soundly. "Nothing there, sweetie." But then, something touched his hand. It was soft, cold, and trembling. Leo recoiled. He looked down, a pale face, eyes wide with terror, and a small, choked whisper. It was Alex, his real son. "Dad, there's someone in my bed." Leo sprang to his feet, turning to face the bed. The light from the nightlight fell on the blanket, where there was no one. The same blue blanket, the same flattened pillow. No smile, no one there at all. Leo looked from the bed to his son, who was huddled under the bed, shaking uncontrollably. "Sweetie, there's no one. You're safe." "No. Dad, didn't you see?" The smile. Leo pulled Alex into a tight hug. He couldn't explain what was happening. Was he dreaming? Had his own exhaustion made him imagine a terrifying smile on his son's face? A cold shiver ran down his spine. He looked at the empty bed. He looked at his son, his eyes filled with panic, and he realized something terrifying. He didn't know who had smiled at him. And if it wasn't Alex, then where did it go? And how long had it been in his house? Panic is a strange thing. It's more than a pounding heart or shaking hands. It's an icy current that runs down your spine, forcing you to act, forcing you to run. And that's exactly what Leo did. He held Alex tight in his arms, as if letting go for a single second would be enough for the child to vanish into thin air. He carried Alex out of the room without a single glance back. The bedroom door closed behind them softly, but to Leo, it sounded like the heavy thud of a coffin lid. They went down the stairs. The light from the living room lamp cast a glow on the family photos hanging on the wall. He saw Alex smiling brightly, holding a teddy bear. He saw himself holding a much younger child, a newborn, looking up at him with trusting eyes. Everything looked the same, but the feeling, it was gone. Leo buckled Alex into the car. The boy was silent, still trembling, his eyes fixed on the window, as if searching for something. Something that was missing, or something that was watching. "Dad, where did it go?" Leo started the car. The engine's roar sounded strangely loud and brutal in the silent night. "Nowhere, sweetie. We're going somewhere safe. To a hotel. There will be lots of people there. You'll be safe." Alex didn't answer. He just kept staring out the window, into the darkness. Leo drove. He didn't know where he was going. He just drove, through the empty streets, under the dim streetlights. He didn't call the police. He didn't call anyone, because he knew if he told them, no one would believe him. "There's something in my son's room." Something that took his smile. It sounded insane. When they got to the hotel, Alex had fallen asleep in the car. Leo carried him inside. As he gently placed Alex on the bed, he noticed something. The small mole on his son's cheek. The one he always kissed goodnight wasn't there. The tiny scar on his knee from a bicycle fall was also gone. But hadn't Alex had those things for a long time? He was certain of it. Leo looked in the mirror. His own reflection stared back. A tired man, with dark circles under his eyes. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. It didn't replace him. What did it do to Alex? He turned back to his son, sleeping peacefully on the bed. Alex still looked like Alex, but Leo felt an invisible distance, an invisible wall between them. Maybe the scars and moles didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling. His Alex was gone. Leo couldn't sleep. He lay on the other bed in the hotel room. The glow of the digital clock on the nightstand, a constant, glowing green reminder of the passing hours. Alex was sleeping soundly, a little lump under the pristine white sheets. Too soundly. The real Alex was a restless sleeper, kicking off blankets, muttering in his sleep about dragons and spaceships. This child was unnaturally still. He got up and went to the small desk in the corner. He opened his laptop, the pale light of the screen illuminating his face. He began to search. He typed in panicked, disjointed phrases: doppelganger, urban legend, child imposter folklore, who replaced my son. The results were a terrifying mix of ancient myths and modern-day creepypastas. There were stories of changeling children, taken by fairies and replaced with their own sickly offspring. There were tales of skinwalkers, and things that could shed their skin and take on the form of a person they had studied. It was all a little too close for comfort. He found a forum for people who claimed to have experienced similar things. One post, in particular, caught his eye. The user, named Ghost, in the Mirror, wrote about a gradual replacement. A father who woke up one day to find his son's favorite stuffed animal was slightly different. Then a scar on his knee had vanished, and finally, his son's voice, which had always been a little high-pitched, was now a deep, resonant whisper. Leo felt his heart hammer against his ribs. He felt sick. It was exactly what was happening to him, but he had to know. He had to prove to himself that this was all a terrible, delusional nightmare. The next morning, he took Alex to a park. He wanted to see if the child would act like his son in a familiar environment. Alex played on the swings, climbed the jungle gym. He looked exactly like Alex, but he never laughed. Not a genuine, belly-deep laugh, just a quiet, flat giggle. Then, Alex pointed at a little girl with a red balloon. "Dad," he said in that unnervingly quiet voice, "she's just like me." "What do you mean, buddy?" "She's all alone," Alex said, his eyes empty. "She just doesn't know it yet." Leo grabbed Alex's hand and pulled him away from the playground. He had an urge to scream, to run, but he stayed calm. He had to. He had to find the truth. He started noticing other things, the little things. Alex's favorite book was a children's story about a talking bear, but when they got home, the book was gone. In its place was an old, dusty, leather-bound book with no title. Alex said he'd found it in the attic, but Leo knew the attic had been sealed for years. Then there was the music box. It had belonged to his late wife, and it had been broken for as long as he could remember. But one night, as he walked past the living room, he heard a sound, a quiet, tinny melody. He walked in, and there it was, on the mantelpiece, the music box playing a tune he had never heard before, a slow, haunting melody. He opened the lid, and the music stopped. He closed it, and the music started again. He opened it, and it stopped. He opened it, and it stopped. He threw the box into the fireplace. It lay there, silent and still. He was standing there staring at it, when he heard a quiet voice from the hallway. "Dad, you broke my favorite toy." It was Alex, standing there in the dark, a tiny figure with a cold, hollow voice. Leo felt a shiver of pure terror. He could feel the eyes on him, watching him. The music box in the fireplace lay motionless, but he could hear the music playing in his head, the haunting melody, the lost trail. The decision to go hiking alone was a foolish one. I'm a city guy, concrete and glass, not this. The mountains had always seemed so serene from a distance, a green, gentle wave on the horizon. Up close, they were a suffocating maze of trees and brush. But I wanted peace. I wanted to escape the constant hum of life, the never-ending noise. The first few hours were perfect. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, and the only sound was the crunch of my boots on the dirt path. It was a good day. It was a normal day. And then it wasn't. My plan was simple. An 8-hour loop. Enough to feel accomplished, but not so long that I'd be caught in the dark. But as the sun began to dip below the jagged peaks, painting the sky in a bruised orange and purple, something felt wrong. I didn't recognize the trail anymore. Every tree looked the same. Every turn of the path a duplicate of the last. My heart started to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course. Night fell fast. The vibrant colors of the sunset bled into a deep, impenetrable black. The forest around me was no longer peaceful. It was a living, breathing thing. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig, it all sounded like footsteps. I switched on my flashlight, the weak beam cutting a lonely circle into the darkness. It was getting weaker by the minute. The batteries were dying. Panic, cold and sharp, took over. I knew I couldn't keep going. I was disoriented and exhausted. Staying put was the only sane option, but the thought of spending the night out here, in this cold, black void, made my blood run cold. I just needed shelter, a place to wait for the sunrise. And then, almost as if the woods had heard my silent plea, I saw it, a broken-down cabin. It was barely a cabin, really, just a pile of rotting wood and sagging shingles. It looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. No lights, no sounds, no sign of life. I knocked on the heavy wooden door. A hollow, thudding sound echoed into the silence. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. I tried the handle. It turned, and the door groaned open with a mournful sound. The air inside was cold and still. The beam of my flashlight flickered across the single room. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a strange sense of luck. In the center of the room, there it was, a bed, perfectly made, a single bed, as if waiting for a single person. I told myself that if the owner came back, I could explain. I was lost. I just needed to rest. I was sure they'd understand. Or maybe they were dead. The thought was a comfort, a grim comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. I crawled onto the bed, the mattress surprisingly firm. My exhaustion was a heavy blanket, a promise of a temporary escape. But as I lay there, my eyes still open, I couldn't ignore the collection of paintings on the walls. Dozens of them. Old portraits, the frames dark and worn. They were all staring at me. Strange, distorted faces. Men, women, children, all of them looking straight at me. And on every single face, a smile. A thin, chilling smile that didn't reach their eyes. Their eyes were blank, empty. They sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to turn away, to close my eyes, but I could feel them, all of them, watching me, waiting. I tried to convince myself that they were just paintings, just old portraits. But as my eyes began to droop, the lines of their smiles seemed to stretch, and in the deepening darkness, I could swear their eyes blinked. I woke up to sunlight, not a weak, timid light filtering through the trees, but a bright, golden warmth flooding the room. The air was no longer cold and stale. It smelled clean, of rain and fresh earth. For a moment, I forgot the terror of the night before. I forgot the frantic hike, the dying flashlight, the chill of the cabin. I was just a man waking up in a sunlit room, with the promise of a new day. I sat up, a wave of confusion washing over me. The room, it was different. The dark, wooden walls were gone. In their place were windows. Dozens of them. They weren't just simple holes in the wall. They were large rectangular panes of glass, set into perfectly smooth frames. Every wall was lined with them, and through every single one I could see the forest. I blinked, hard. The exhaustion had to be playing tricks on me. My mind, my eyes, they were still half asleep. I had to have been dreaming. It was the only explanation. The chilling faces, the blank smiles, the feeling of being watched. It was all a nightmare, a figment of my panicked imagination. I got out of bed and walked over to the nearest window. My hand reached out and touched the cool glass. It was real. I looked out. I saw a bird on a branch, its feathers glistening with morning dew. I saw a squirrel scampering up a tree trunk. Everything looked so real, so normal. I looked at the bed in the center of the room. A perfectly normal bed in a perfectly normal cabin. The cabin had windows, not portraits. I felt a giddy sense of relief. I laughed, a short, breathless sound that sounded strange in the quiet. The fear was gone. It had all been a dream. A terrifying, vivid dream. But just a dream. The cabin was a simple, rustic shelter, a safe haven from the storm. I moved from window to window, mesmerized by the view. The cabin was so close to the path. I could see the trail I had walked the day before. How had I not seen this place? How had I missed a cabin with so many windows, with such a clear view of the trail? My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had been so tired, so focused on the ground, that I hadn't looked up. Maybe the trees had been thicker. It didn't matter now. The sun was out. I was safe. I had almost forgotten my backpack when I noticed the mud on my boots. It was a detail I hadn't seen in my dream. The cold, wet mud was all over the floor, a stark contrast to the perfect cleanliness of the cabin. It reminded me that the hike, at least, had been real. I turned back to the windows, a sudden cold dread creeping up my spine. My gaze lingered on one of the panes of glass, then another. Something wasn't quite right. The glass was too perfect, too clean. It looked like a photograph. And as the morning light grew brighter, a horrifying realization began to dawn on me. They weren't windows. They were portraits, but not the portraits from last night. Not paintings, they were portraits of the outdoors. And as I stared at one, I noticed a tiny detail, a small crack in the glass, right through a tree branch, and another, a long, thin scratch. I knelt down and saw my own distorted reflection staring back at me. A horrified face, wide-eyed and pale, trapped inside a pane of glass that was supposed to show me the sky. The world outside was a lie. The sun, the birds, the path, it was all a fixed image, a horrifying collection of portraits, a static, unchangeable view of the outside world. The cabin wasn't a cabin, it was a box. A dark, terrifying box with no windows. And all those faces I saw last night, they were also portraits. Portraits of the previous hikers who had also been fooled by this trick of light and reality. And they were still watching, all of them, waiting for the next one, waiting for me. My breath hitched in my throat. The giddiness of relief was replaced by a cold, stomach-churning terror. They weren't windows, they were portraits. I stumbled backward, the perfect, unblinking image of a sunlit forest mocking me. The cabin wasn't a cabin. It was a dark, suffocating box. And all those faces I'd seen last night, they weren't paintings. They were portraits, just like these. Portraits of the previous hikers who had also been fooled by this trick of light and reality. They were still here, trapped. A primal scream built up in my chest. I had to get out. I ran to the door, the one I had entered through. It was just a flat wooden wall now. No handle, no seams, just a solid, unmoving piece of timber. I pounded on it, my knuckles scraping against the rough grain. A frantic, useless rhythm. My mind, which had been so quick to rationalize the windows, was now a swirling vortex of horror. My flashlight, I had left it on the bed. I grabbed it, the beam now a faint, pathetic orange glow. It had just enough life left for me to see the walls, to see them for what they truly were. Every square inch of the walls was covered in these portraits. Men, women, children, and landscapes. A horrifying gallery of the forgotten. I looked at the bed in the center of the room. The same clean, perfect bed. It was a stage for the next victim. I looked at the portrait I had mistaken for the sunlit forest. The birds on the branches were frozen in time. The squirrel was a still image on the tree trunk. It wasn't a view. It was a memory. The cabin, this thing, it didn't just capture people. It captured their perception. It made them believe what they wanted to see, what they needed to see, before it consumed them. I fell to my knees, my mind unraveling. The faces from last night, the chilling smiles, they weren't paintings. They were the last, terrified moments of a human consciousness. They were the real windows, the real view. And I had been so close. So close to understanding. Then, a sound, a quiet, soft sound from behind me. A click. I slowly turned around. The door. It was there. The handle was back. The seams visible. The cabin had given me a way out. I stumbled towards it, my body numb, my heart thudding a sick, hopeful rhythm. I had to get out. I had to run. I ran. I didn't stop, didn't look back. The cabin receded into the trees. My feet, which had been so weak, now had the strength of a panicked animal. The path was clear. Every turn, every tree, was now a familiar landmark. It was as if the forest itself had decided to let me go. I found my car, a battered silver sedan that had never looked so beautiful. I threw open the door, started the engine, and drove away without a second thought. I was safe. I was out. I had escaped. It's been a few weeks since the hike. The nightmares are gone. The city hum is back. The familiar noise a comfort. I look in the mirror every morning and see a normal face. A normal life. I'm a city guy after all. Concrete and glass. Not that. I'm standing at the window of my office, a warm coffee cup in my hands. The view is nice. A park, with trees and a squirrel. The sky is a beautiful blue. I watch a bird land on a branch outside. Its feathers glisten with morning dew. Everything is perfect. So perfect. My boss walks over. He smiles. A wide, gentle smile. "Nice view," he says. I smile back, and I can feel it. The smile on my face. It feels different. It feels like a portrait, a fixed, unchangeable smile. He walks away. I look back at the window. The bird is still there, frozen on the branch. The squirrel is a still image on the tree trunk. The sky is the same shade of blue. It never changes. I've been looking at this same view every day, and I never noticed. I feel my eyes. They are wide. They are empty. And I finally understand. I didn't escape. The cabin didn't let me go. It consumed me. I am a portrait now, a window for the next person to look into. Trapped in a perfect, unchanging memory. The woods are still there, somewhere, and so is the cabin, waiting. And I am here, in the city, just a window, for someone else to see. The red wristband. Hospitals are strange places at night. The sterile, bustling chaos of the day fades into a quiet, almost reverent stillness. The fluorescent lights hum with a low, constant drone. The air, normally thick with the scent of antiseptic and sickness, takes on a thin, lonely quality. This is the world of the night shift. My world. My name is Dr. Michael Reed. I'm a surgeon, and for the past 5 years, this hospital has been my home. It's an old place, built back when medicine was more of an art than a science. There's a certain weight to the history here, a quiet understanding of life and death. You see it in the way the shadows pool in the corners of the long hallways, and you feel it in the whispers you swear you hear from empty rooms. To keep track of everything, we use a simple system. A colored wristband for every patient, green for the living, red for the deceased. A straightforward clinical way to manage the endless cycle of new arrivals and final departures. It was just after 2 in the morning when the call came in. The supply closet on the surgical floor was out of a specific type of surgical suture. Standard issue. Nothing unusual. But the spare was kept in the basement. The basement. It's not a place you want to be after dark. The hospital's history feels heavier down there, in the damp, cavernous hallways, where the pipes groan and the old machinery hums a discordant tune. The fluorescent lights flicker with an unsettling rhythm. But it was my job. I walked the empty corridors toward the elevator. My footsteps were the only sound, a sharp, lonely echo on the polished floor. The hospital felt like a ghost ship, a vessel filled with sleeping souls and silent memories. I pressed the down button. A small square light lit up. I waited, and for the first time that night, I felt a familiar shiver run up my spine. It was a feeling I had learned to trust in this place, a sense that tonight, the rules of life and death might be different. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, the doors sliding open to reveal a single occupant. A woman in a patient gown was standing inside. She was middle-aged, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She wasn't pressing any buttons. She was just waiting. Patients were allowed to roam the hospital, especially long-term residents, but they were supposed to be back in their rooms by 10. It was 2 in the morning. I gave her a small, professional nod and stepped inside. I hit the button for the basement. The doors hissed shut, but just before they closed completely, I saw her. Her eyes. They were wide and dark, but with an odd distant glaze, as if she were looking at something far beyond the metal walls of the elevator. The ride down was quiet. The soft hum of the cables was the only sound. I found myself stealing glances at her. She seemed harmless, pale, a little frail, but otherwise unremarkable. I couldn't place her. I knew most of the long-term patients. Her face didn't ring a bell. The doors opened with a ding, revealing the dimly lit, cavernous space of the basement. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old machinery. I took a step out, my mind already on the supplies I needed to find, and then I saw him. He was at the end of the long corridor, a lone figure shuffling toward the elevator. He was limping badly, dragging his right foot with a labored effort. My blood ran cold. The face was unmistakable. I had seen it just last night. The same deep lines, the same tired eyes. The man from bed 402. The patient who had bled out on my operating table less than 24 hours ago. The patient I had spent 3 hours trying to save, only to have my efforts fail. I instinctively recoiled, my hand shooting out and slamming the closed door button. I hit it again and again, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The man saw me. His tired eyes widened, and he tried to move faster, but his leg wouldn't cooperate. The elevator doors began to slide shut, inch by inch, a torturous, slow motion. I could see his mouth open, a soundless plea on his lips. Then, with a soft click, the doors sealed shut. The elevator began its ascent, taking me back up to the world of the living. I leaned against the wall, my heart hammering. I closed my eyes, a cold sweat breaking out on my brow. My mind replayed the image of his face, the desperation in his eyes, his slow, agonizing limp. Then I heard her voice, the woman from the elevator. It was calm, almost too calm. "Why did you do that?" she asked. He was trying to use the lift. I opened my eyes and looked at her. Her expression was completely blank. No fear, no surprise, just a simple, genuine question. "You don't understand," I said, my voice shaky. "Did you see his wrist?" I gestured to my own wrist, as if to show her what I meant. "It was red," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "His wristband was red. He died last night. I would know, because I did his surgery." Her face remained blank. She tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes fixed on mine. The silence in the elevator was suffocating. I felt a surge of frustration, then fear. Was she not listening? Did she not understand what I was saying? "Dead?" she said, her voice a flat, hollow whisper. But he was walking. He was trying to get on the elevator. He was a ghost, I stammered, the word feeling ridiculous on my tongue. "The red wristband. It means he's gone." They tagged them. "It's hospital policy." A flicker of something. Was it pity? Amusement? Crossed her face. "A policy for ghosts," she said, her lips curling into a thin, pale smile. "That sounds inefficient." The elevator continued its silent journey upward. I leaned my head back against the cold metal, my thoughts a frantic mess. This woman was unsettlingly calm. Too calm. I tried to recall her face, to remember if she had a record, if she was a long-term patient with a history of delusions. Nothing came to mind. She was a blank slate. I looked at my own wrist, at my watch. It was still 2 a.m. Time felt like it had stretched, like the elevator was moving through a viscous, molasses-like substance. I glanced at her again. Her skin was a translucent white, almost luminous in the dim elevator light. There was a faint scent in the air, a scent I couldn't place. It wasn't antiseptic. It wasn't sickness. It was clean, like cold stone after a rain. As we ascended, a chilling thought began to take hold. What if she wasn't alive either? I knew the patients who were allowed to roam, and she wasn't one of them. She was supposed to be in her room. Or maybe her time had already come. The hospital was a labyrinth of living and dying souls, a place where the lines blurred in the darkness. I tried to act normal. "Are you a patient here?" I asked, my voice a little too loud. She didn't answer. She just continued to stare at me, her eyes unblinking, that faint smile playing on her lips. I looked away, my heart pounding again. I told myself it was just a coincidence. She was just a confused patient. My mind, exhausted from a 20-hour shift, was playing tricks on me. That's all. I looked at the floor numbers ticking by. On the display. 3, 4, 5. Every floor felt like a century. I had to get out of this box. I needed to be back on my floor, back in the light. back in the sterile, predictable world I knew. The elevator slowed. The doors began to slide open, revealing the brightly lit surgical floor. My sanctuary. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I was safe. I took a step forward, ready to bolt out, and that's when she raised her hand. Slowly, deliberately. I saw the wristband. It was a stark, unmistakable red, the color of a final goodbye. She smiled, a terrifying, beautiful smile that didn't belong to her, and her voice, a gentle whisper, echoed in the confined space of the elevator. Like this one? I froze. My foot was halfway out of the elevator. The smile on her face was serene, almost peaceful, but the sight of that wristband, the stark crimson red against her pale skin, sent a jolt of pure terror through me. My mind, a frantic, desperate thing, tried to find a reason. A sick joke? A mistake? But I knew that color. It was the color of finality. I tried to speak, to scream, but the words were trapped in my throat. I stumbled back, falling into the elevator car. The doors, which had just opened, now began to slide shut, slowly, deliberately, like a coffin sealing itself. I slammed my hand against the open button again and again, but the controls were unresponsive. Why? I managed to choke out. Her smile never wavered. The rules, she whispered. Everyone has to follow the rules. The elevator car hummed, and we began to ascend again, leaving my floor behind, my sanctuary. I frantically pressed every button, a useless, desperate rhythm. The digital display above the door flickered, bypassing the floors one by one. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. The pallor of her skin wasn't just a sign of illness. It was the color of ash. Her eyes, those dark, unblinking pools, were the eyes of the dead. The elevator car began to fill with a cold, damp air. I could smell the scent I had noticed earlier, like cold stone and old earth. I was trapped. The elevator stopped. The doors opened with a soft chime. This wasn't a hospital floor. It was a long, endless hallway. The walls were peeling. The lights flickered erratically. And at the end of the hall, a figure was standing. The man from the basement. The one I had slammed the door on. He was still limping, but his eyes were fixed on me, no longer with desperation, but with a vacant, knowing stare. He wasn't the only one. Figures began to emerge from the darkness of the hallway, all of them wearing patient gowns. They were all walking with the same slow, shuffling gait, all of them with wristbands of the same crimson red. They didn't make a sound. They just watched me. The woman beside me finally spoke, her voice a soft, final sigh. "We were waiting for you, doctor." I looked at my own wrist, but there was nothing there, just my own skin. A small, desperate part of me clung to that thought. I was alive. I wasn't like them. I wasn't. She reached out and placed her cold hand on my arm. A tingling sensation spread from her touch, a slow burn that felt like a brand. I looked down, and there it was. A thin red line was slowly, impossibly, bleeding into my skin, right where a wristband would be. The elevator doors began to close. My heart pounded, but it was a muffled, distant sound now, like the sound of a drum played from a long, long way off. She smiled, a familiar final smile. "Welcome to the night shift," she whispered. The doors sealed shut. The elevator car began its journey, descending into the deep, quiet darkness of the hospital. It was going down, to the basement, to the world of the dead. And I knew that somewhere, on a floor above, a young doctor would be walking alone to a supply closet, waiting for the elevator to arrive. And when the doors opened, he would see a man inside, and a chilling smile on his face, with a band on his wrist, a final, horrifying shade of red. White with red. My name is Mark. Or at least, it's been Mark for the last 34 years. I'm an architect. I design buildings, places for people to live, places that are meant to feel safe, welcoming, and whole. And yet, for the better part of a decade, I haven't felt that way myself. Not in my old apartment, not in my last relationship, not in my own skin. So, I packed my life into boxes and moved. The new place was a tower of a building, all steel and glass against the city skyline. My new apartment was on the 7th floor, a place I hoped would be a blank canvas, a fresh start. It was an old building, but with a new facade, a new management. It looked pristine, almost too perfect. When I arrived, The receptionist was there, a young woman with a tired smile. She handed me a set of keys, the metal cold and heavy in my palm. The whole process was quick, professional, but then she stopped, her smile fading into a serious, almost strained expression. "Just one thing," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "There's a door on your floor, at the very end of the hall. It doesn't have a number, just a door." I nodded, my mind already on the boxes waiting for me in the lobby. "Okay, don't disturb it," she continued, her eyes locked on mine. "Don't knock, don't try the handle, just leave it be. People who live here, they just know to leave it alone." I found it odd, a little creepy, sure, but mostly just strange. Why would a building have a door with no number? And why was the receptionist, a young professional, so serious about it? Was it a storage closet? A utility room? But I was too busy with my new life, too focused on the promise of a fresh start, to ask. I just thanked her, smiled, and headed to the elevator. The ride up to the 7th floor was silent. The elevator was old, and it creaked as it went up, a quiet, mournful sound. The doors opened, and I stepped out into a long, quiet hallway. There were 10 apartments on my floor, 10 doors with numbers neatly aligned in a row. As I walked, I counted them: 701, 702, 703, up to 710. And at the very end of the hall, just as she had said, there it was, a door with no number. It was identical to all the others, the same dark wood, the same brass doorknob, but it had no nameplate, no peephole, no number, just a blank, smooth surface. It stood there, a silent anomaly, a void in the perfectly structured hallway. My curiosity was a seed planted in the back of my mind. I told myself it was just a strange quirk of the building's layout. But as I spent the rest of the day unpacking, that seed began to grow. The more I organized my new life, the more my mind went back to that one empty door. I'd catch myself staring at it from my own apartment door. I'd imagine what could be behind it. A vacant room? A secret? It was a mystery. And I, a man who built his life on clear, defined blueprints, couldn't resist. Just before midnight, I decided to go see for myself. I told myself it was just to satisfy a harmless curiosity. I had no idea that some doors, once you look through them, can't ever be closed. The hallway was quieter at midnight. The city hum was a low, distant drone, a sound you only notice when you stop listening to everything else. I walked to the end of the hall, my footsteps a lonely echo on the polished floor. The blank door was exactly as I'd left it, silent, unmoving, a perfectly smooth surface with no hint of what lay behind it. I reached out, my hand hovering just above the doorknob. The receptionist's warning echoed in my mind. Don't try the handle. But my curiosity was a fire that had to be fed. The knob was cold. I turned it slowly. It didn't budge. Locked. A small, irrational wave of relief washed over me. I had tried. I had satisfied the urge. I could go back to my apartment now. But as I turned to leave, my eyes fell on the keyhole. It was just a small brass circle, an eye to an unknown world. My logical mind, the one that designed buildings and solved complex structural problems, told me to walk away. But the other part of me, the part that had been running from my old life, needed to know. I got down on my knees, the cold tile floor sending a shiver through my jeans. I lowered my eye to the keyhole. The view was narrow, distorted, but it was there. The apartment was empty. No furniture, no boxes, just a vast vacant space. I scanned the whole place. It was bigger than I thought. I expected to see a dark, dusty room, but it was well lit and completely, utterly empty, except for a corner. In the far corner of the room, facing the wall, was a person, a woman. She was just standing there, her back to me. Her skin was a startling, almost luminous white, a perfect contrast to her long, straight black hair that fell down her back like a dark waterfall. She was unnervingly still, not even a slight movement, a shift of her weight. She was just there. A sudden wave of shame and unease swept over me. I felt like a voyeur, like I had invaded a private, sacred space. She was a tenant, a person who just wanted to be alone. I had no right to be here, to be looking at her. I pulled my eye away from the keyhole and stood up. my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. I quickly walked back to my apartment. The image of her pale skin and dark hair burned into my mind. I told myself she was just someone who wanted her privacy, a person who found comfort in an empty room, standing alone. I tried to dismiss the feeling, to brush it off as a harmless mistake. I couldn't have been more wrong. The image of her haunted my dreams. The pale skin, the long black hair, the unnerving stillness. My architect's mind, so used to order and logic, couldn't shake the unsettling anomaly of her. Who was she? Why was she standing there, in an empty apartment, facing a blank wall? I spent the next day trying to forget. I painted a wall, assembled a bookshelf, made a trip to the grocery store, but every time I passed a blank wall, every time I saw a reflection in a window, her image would flash in my mind. The receptionist's warning, "Don't disturb now," had a strange, menacing weight to it. I couldn't help myself. As night fell again, I found myself drawn back to the hallway. It was like a magnet pulling me. I told myself it was for a different reason this time. Not out of morbid curiosity, but out of a need to understand. Maybe I could see something else. Maybe she had moved. Maybe I had been wrong. I knelt down, the cold floor familiar against my jeans. I brought my eye to the keyhole again. This time, there was no hesitation, just a desperate, burning need for an answer. But the view, it wasn't what I had seen before. The space behind the door was no longer empty. It was filled with a single uniform color, a vibrant, shocking red. All I could see was red. Just red. My first thought was that she had caught me. The woman had seen me peering through her keyhole the night before and had covered it up, maybe with a piece of red cloth or tape. A simple, passive-aggressive move to protect her privacy. It made sense. It was logical. I felt a pang of disappointment, but also a strange sense of relief. The mystery was over. I had my answer. She wasn't an otherworldly being. She was just a woman who wanted to be left alone. I stood up, feeling a bit foolish. The strange, unsettling feeling from the night before had been just that strange. It wasn't supernatural. I told myself I could finally go back to my life, to the new beginning I had promised myself. But the feeling didn't go away. The red was too perfect. It wasn't the dull red of a cloth or the faded red of an old book. It was a blood red, a deep, saturated, terrifying color that seemed to glow from behind the door. I couldn't shake the image, the unsettling quality of it. I needed a different kind of answer, one that a keyhole couldn't provide. I went back to the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. It was a long ride down, filled with the groaning of the old cables and the silence of my own racing mind. The receptionist was at her desk, her head bowed over a ledger. She looked up as I approached. Her tired smile was gone, replaced by a grim, knowing expression. It was as if she had been waiting for me. She didn't need me to say a word. "You looked through the keyhole, didn't you?" she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a sigh of an old, tired soul, and for some reason, I felt compelled to tell the truth. "Yes," I said. "I saw a woman, and then all red." She closed her eyes for a moment, a wave of exhaustion washing over her face. Then she looked at me, her eyes filled with a deep, ancient sadness. "Well," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I guess I have to tell you the story. It's the rules." The receptionist sighed, a long, weary sound that held the weight of years. She leaned forward, her elbows on the counter, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "They used to live here a long time ago," she began. "A couple. They were different, very different. They had the same pale skin, the same dark hair you saw, but their eyes were red, a deep, unsettling crimson, like blood." She paused, her gaze distant, as if she were seeing them in her mind's eye. They were quiet, kept to themselves, but people noticed. They talked about them, whispered in the hallways. They called them the white with red. I felt a chill run down my spine. The image of the woman in the keyhole, her skin so pale, her hair so dark, it all matched. But the eyes I hadn't seen. One night, she continued, there was a scream, just one. Then, silence. The police came. The apartment was a mess. The husband was gone. And the wife was gone too. They never found a body. Just a lot of blood everywhere. On the walls, on the floor. It was a bloodbath. My mouth went dry. My mind reeled. It was just a story. A ghost story. A legend. Made up to scare new tenants. It had to be. But here's the thing, she said, her voice dropping even lower. The police searched everything. They went over every inch of that apartment. They said the husband went crazy, killed his wife, took her body, and vanished. Case closed. But that's not what the people here believed. They said the couple wasn't human. That they were something else. Something that could hide in the shadows. Something that never truly leaves. She looked at me, her eyes holding a deep, terrifying certainty. They say the husband went mad and painted the walls with her blood. But others say the wife didn't die. She just changed. Became part of the house. That she's still there. Hiding. Waiting. The story was insane. But the way she told it, with that quiet, tired conviction, made it feel real. It made the blood on the walls a real, terrifying possibility. We warn everyone, she said, not to look. Not to disturb the door, because she's still in there. And if you look through the keyhole, she looks back. And once she's seen you, once you've looked into her world, you can never unsee it. She sighed again. You were lucky, she said. The first time, she was just standing there. She was letting you see. The second time, she was showing you. The red. That's a warning. A final warning. It's the color of her eyes. It's the last thing you see before she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The words hung in the air. A final, horrifying threat. My mind flashed back to the keyhole. To the solid, unmoving, shocking red. It wasn't a piece of cloth. It wasn't tape. It was an eye. A terrifying, inhuman eye. I felt a wave of cold dread wash over me. I had looked. I had seen. And now, I was a part of the story. I thanked her, my voice a hollow whisper, and walked back to the elevator. The fear had turned into a cold, terrifying certainty. The apartment wasn't just empty. It was occupied, and the eyes I had been so curious about were now looking at me. They had been looking at me all along. The ride up to the 7th floor was an eternity. The groaning of the old cables, the soft chime of the floors passing by, it all felt like a prelude to a horror I couldn't escape. The receptionist's story had painted a vivid, terrifying picture in my mind. An inhuman couple, a murder, and a ghost with blood-red eyes. I had looked into her world, and she had looked back. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway was eerily silent. My own apartment door, with its welcoming number 708, seemed miles away. I walked slowly, my eyes fixed on the empty space at the end of the hall. The blank door, the one with no number. It stood there, a silent sentinel, a void in the middle of a perfectly normal floor. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. I stopped at my door. I was safe. I was home. But the feeling of relief didn't come. A cold sense of being watched, of being followed, settled over me. I felt a presence behind me. I slowly turned around. The hallway was empty, but as I looked at the blank door, I saw a flicker, a soft, reddish glow from the keyhole. It was watching me. I tried to rationalize it. It was just a reflection, a trick of the light. But the voice in my head, the voice that had seen the red, told me otherwise. The voice told me she was there, waiting. I turned back to my door, my hand on the doorknob. The coldness of the brass was a shock. I looked at the door. My door, the one with the number 708, and I saw it. A faint scratch on the wood, a small dent in the frame that I had never noticed before. A detail that didn't belong. A detail that didn't belong on my door. My blood ran cold. The receptionist's words came back to me. Don't disturb the door with no number. My apartment was right next to it. What if I had been wrong all along? What if I had been living next to her? Not in a new home, but in a trap. A sound, a soft scratching sound came from the inside of my apartment. I pulled my hand away from the doorknob as if it were on fire. The sound grew louder, a scraping, dragging sound. It was coming from under my door. A pale white hand with long, spindly fingers slowly began to crawl out from the gap at the bottom of the door. A hand with a crimson-red wristband. The hand stopped, and then a head followed. It was the woman I had seen in the keyhole. Her skin was a translucent white. Her hair, a long, dark sheet, and her eyes, they were a deep, terrifying red. She smiled, a wide, empty smile, as she crawled out of my apartment. "You've been in my room," she whispered, her voice a hollow echo. "You've been in my home." The door to my apartment slowly creaked open. The room inside was dark and empty, a vast, vacant space with no furniture, no boxes, no life, just like the one I had seen in the keyhole. I looked at the number on the door, 708. My apartment. It wasn't my apartment. It was the apartment with no number. It was her apartment, and I had been living there all along. The woman stood up, her smile widening. "You were just a guest," she said, her voice a low, terrifying whisper. "You were just a temporary tenant." I looked down at my own hand. My skin was turning a pale, sickly white. My hair, a light brown, was darkening, turning into a shade of deep, terrifying black. My eyes, I could feel them. They were changing. They were becoming red. I was no longer Mark. I was the husband, the one who had gone mad, the one who had killed his wife, the one who had become a part of the house. I had been living her story, and now I was her, and she was free. I looked at the hallway. It was no longer a hallway. It was a long, dark corridor with no end. I was trapped in a loop of a story that was never mine. The doors around me began to fade, their numbers disappearing into the dark. Only one door remained, a door with no number. My door, my home. I looked through the keyhole. I saw a man. He was kneeling, his eye to the keyhole, a look of curiosity on his face. I smiled, a wide, empty, terrifying smile. My eyes, they were red. I was her, and now I was him. The story had found a new victim and a new home. The mother's call. The decision to move was made in a flash of optimistic madness. My husband, David, found the place, an old Victorian home on the edge of town, with a sprawling lawn and a porch swing that creaked just right. For our daughter, Lily, it was a dream. She was 10, with a wild imagination and a love for old things. She fell in love with her new room on the second floor, with its slanted ceiling and the window that looked out onto a massive oak tree. For me, Sarah, it was a new beginning, a chance to leave the stress of the city behind. The house was a quiet place, a peaceful place, the kind of place you could hear every sound, from the whisper of the wind through the eaves to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I was downstairs, sorting through old photos, when I heard it. "Dinner's ready." It was my voice. I looked up at the clock. 5:30. Perfect. Lily was upstairs, in her room, hunched over a book, doing her homework. I smiled to myself, the warmth of the home settling over me. It was a perfect, normal moment. I heard the small creak of her door opening, the soft thud of her feet on the wooden floor. She was a good girl, a dutiful daughter. She always came when she was called. I waited for her to appear at the top of the stairs, her small, slender figure silhouetted against the light from her room. But she didn't appear. Instead, there was a sudden, small gasp, a soft thud, a shuffling sound. I didn't think much of it. A kid's stumble, a dropped book. I went back to the photos, a little too soon, a little too confidently. A few moments later, I heard it again. A whisper from the top of the stairs, my name on her lips. "Mom?" I looked up. Nothing. The sound was gone. I told myself it was just my imagination. The house was old. The sounds played tricks on you. I smiled. A little too wide, a little too long. I heard my voice again. A soft, gentle call from the kitchen. "Lily, dinner's on the table." And then I heard it. The sound of a door opening. A faint, quiet footstep on the floor above. My heart, which had been so warm, so content, suddenly felt like a block of ice. I stood up slowly and went to the bottom of the stairs. My head tilted back, I listened. The house was silent, too silent. And then I heard a sound from the living room. A soft, rhythmic hum. The television. But David was out. He had gone to get groceries. A cold hand, an icy dread, took hold of my heart. I knew that sound. I knew that voice. It was me. A recording. A lie. I looked up the stairs, into the shadows. My daughter's room was at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, a small, dark mouth. I took a step, a single, terrifying step, and then I heard the sound again, the whisper from the stairs. Mom? This time, it wasn't a question. It was a plea. A desperate, terrified whisper. My blood ran cold. I knew that voice. I knew that sound. It was Lily. She wasn't downstairs. She was still up there. And the thing that had called her down was not me. My heart froze. The whisper from the stairs was so faint, so terrified it was barely a sound. It was Lily's voice, not the confident, happy girl who came when she was called, but a child filled with pure, unadulterated fear. A child who was still upstairs. But if she was upstairs, then who, or what, had called her down for dinner? A cold hand, an icy dread, took hold of my heart. I knew that sound. I knew that voice. It was Lily, and the thing that had called her down was not me. I took a single, terrified step toward the stairs. Then, a sudden, swift movement, not from Lily, not from the kitchen, but from the darkness beside me. A hand shot out and grabbed me. Not a gentle hand, but a cold, firm grip that pulled me back with a shocking strength. I gasped. A scream trapped in my throat, and was yanked into the small laundry room, a small, dark closet between the living room and the stairs. The door clicked shut behind me. I was trapped. I turned, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, ready to fight, and I saw her, my daughter, my beautiful, brave Lily. Her face was a sheet of white, her eyes wide, bloodshot, and filled with tears. She was shaking so hard her whole body trembled. She put a finger to her lips, a gesture for silence. Then she pulled me close, her small arms wrapped around my waist, and buried her face in my clothes. She was cold, a deep, bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I held her, stroking her hair, my own fear momentarily replaced by the overwhelming need to protect her. "Lily, what happened?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She just pulled me closer, her body rigid with fear. And then I heard it again. A voice. My voice. It was coming from the hallway, right outside the laundry room door. The same voice I had heard moments before, the one that had called for Lily. It was a beautiful voice. A soft, gentle, loving voice. My voice. "Lily, honey," it called. "Mommy's waiting. Where are you, sweetie?" It was a perfect imitation. The tone, the inflection, the little lilt at the end of sweetie. It was so perfect, so flawless, that for a single, horrifying second, I doubted myself. Was I in the wrong place? Had I forgotten something? Lily's body tensed in my arms. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a terror that was too old for a 10-year-old girl. She spoke, her voice a barely audible whisper, a broken, terrified whisper that came from a place so deep inside her it felt like it had been ripped out. "Don't go down there, Mom," she said, her eyes locked on mine. I heard it too. My mind raced. I had heard it. A small whisper from the top of the stairs, a whisper that was supposed to be my daughter, a whisper that had told me she was in trouble, and she had heard it too. The call from the kitchen, the perfect, terrible echo of my own voice. I pulled her closer. Outside the laundry room door, the voice called out again, a little more insistent this time, a little less patient. "Lily," it said, "dinner is getting cold." The sound of my heart was the only thing I could hear. It was a frantic, desperate beat, a countdown to a horror I couldn't comprehend. We were trapped in a house that was no longer ours, trapped with a thing that wore my voice like a disguise and knew my daughter's name. And it was waiting for us, right outside the door. We were trapped in the laundry room. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but Lily was shaking so hard I had to put my arm around her to steady her. My mind, so used to logic and order, was a chaotic mess. The voice outside the door was mine, a perfect, flawless imitation, but it wasn't me. I was right here, holding my daughter, my own fear momentarily replaced by the need to protect her. I held her close, trying to be a shield. My eyes scanned the small, dark room, the washing machine, a shelf of folded towels, a laundry basket filled with clothes. There was a small, high window, but it was too small to fit through. We were cornered. From the hallway, the voice called out again. This time, it was laced with a new tone, a hint of impatience, a touch of malice. "Lily, honey, don't make me wait." The silence that followed was even worse than the voice. It was a suffocating, heavy silence. I could hear every sound in the house now. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room, the soft creak of the floorboards on the first floor, and then a new sound, a soft, deliberate scraping, the sound of a chair being pulled out from a table, the sound of a dinner plate being placed down, the sound of a knife and fork clinking. It was still making dinner. It was still playing the part. My breath hitched. I put my mouth to Lily's ear, my voice a barely audible whisper. "We have to be quiet. We have to call your dad." I pulled my phone from my pocket. No signal. Of course, the house, this thing, had cut us off. We were on our own. I looked at Lily. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the door, her small body rigid with fear. She hadn't said a word since that whispered warning. Then, a sudden new sound. A voice. David's voice. From the hallway. It called out, "Sarah, Lily, are you guys in here?" The voice was strained, a little rough. The voice of a man who was scared. My blood ran cold. Was it a new trick? Was it trying to lure us out? I held Lily tighter. I knew David was at the store. He was supposed to be back in an hour. This was a trap. But then, the voice changed. It was no longer a call. It was a soft, urgent whisper. "Sarah, it's me. I'm in the study. The phone lines are down. It's in the house." I heard it call out. I heard it. "Answer me." My heart, which had been so sure, was now filled with a new, terrifying uncertainty. Was it him? Was it real? I didn't know. The house was a labyrinth of lies, a place where echoes wore the voices of the people I loved. A new sound came from the hallway, a soft, wet thud, followed by a slow, dragging sound. It was coming toward the laundry room door. "It's in the house," the voice in the hallway whispered again, a new kind of terror in its tone. I heard it. "Answer me." Lily squeezed my hand. Her voice, a tiny, fragile whisper, broke the silence. "Mom, it's him. Dad's in the house." He heard it too. My mind was a mess, a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and despair. One of them was a lie, my husband or my daughter, and I had no way of knowing which one to trust. The thing outside the door was waiting, and I knew it was waiting for me to make the wrong choice. The voice from the hallway, now David's voice, was a soft, frantic whisper. "Sarah, it's me. I'm in the study. The phone lines are down. It's in the house." I heard it call out. I heard it. "Answer me." My mind was a whirlwind of fear and doubt. David was supposed to be at the grocery store. But what if he had come back early? What if he had heard the voice too? My daughter, Lily, was clinging to me, her small body rigid with terror. She had whispered to me that it was him, that she knew his voice. But how could I be sure? The thing outside had already copied my voice perfectly. Could it do the same with David's? I looked from Lily's tear-streaked face to the door of the laundry room. My heart was a frantic, desperate thing, a drum against my ribs. I had to know. I had to choose. But how could I know which one was real? The voice of my husband, or the wordless terror of my daughter? A new sound from the hallway, a soft, wet thud, followed by a slow, dragging sound. It was coming toward the laundry room door, the sound of something heavy, something broken. The voice in the hallway whispered again, a new kind of terror in its tone. "Sarah, Lily, it's in here with me." The sound stopped right outside the door. Then, a soft scratch. Something was at the door. Trying to get in, I held Lily tighter, my eyes locked on the door. It was no longer a question of who to trust. It was a question of survival. I had to find another way out. I looked around the room, my eyes frantically searching. The window was too small. The door was the only way, but it was blocked. Lily looked up at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying, absolute certainty. She pulled me toward the back of the laundry room. There, tucked behind the washing machine, was a small, almost invisible door, a utility door. It led to a small space behind the walls, a crawl space for the pipes. "This way, Mom," she whispered. I found it when we were playing hide and seek. The door was unlocked. I pulled it open and pushed Lily inside. The space was dark, dusty, and smelled of damp earth. I crawled in after her, pulling the door shut behind me. We were in a black, suffocating void. The only sound was the frantic pounding of my heart. From outside, we heard a soft, rhythmic tapping on the laundry room door. It was a gentle, almost playful sound. Then, a voice, a soft, familiar voice, began to hum a lullaby. The one I used to sing to Lily when she was a baby. My voice. We crawled through the dark, through a labyrinth of old pipes and cold air. We finally came to a small opening. It led to the master bedroom, my bedroom. I pulled open the door, and we stumbled out into the room. The room was cold, unnaturally cold. The moonlight from the windows cast long, thin shadows on the floor. I looked around, my heart pounding. I went to the closet and found it, an old hunting rifle. It was heavy in my hands, a cold comfort. I loaded it with a trembling hand. We were safe. We had a weapon. We had a way out. But as I looked at the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was latched. Locked from the outside, I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. I ran to the other windows. All of them were the same. The house had sealed us in. It wasn't just a place. It was a prison. And then I heard it. The door to the bedroom. A soft, gentle click. It was unlocked. Someone was coming in. Not one person, but two. The sound of two pairs of feet on the floor. Two voices. A woman's voice and a man's. A soft, familiar hum, my voice. And David's. They were in the house. And they were coming for us. The door to the bedroom clicked open. A slow, agonizing sound. My heart stopped. I stood in the middle of the room, the rifle heavy in my hands, a useless, cold weight. The moonlight from the windows was our only light, casting long, thin shadows that danced like phantoms. I heard the footsteps, two pairs, a man's and a woman's, my husband's and mine. A figure emerged from the darkness of the hallway. It was David, my David. He smiled, a soft, warm smile that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were dark and empty, a horrifying void. He was a perfect copy, but he wasn't him. And then she appeared, a woman in a dressing gown. Her face was pale. Her long hair fell over her shoulders. She was me. She looked exactly like me. She smiled, a perfect replica of my own warm, gentle smile. But her eyes, they were as empty as David's. "Sarah, honey," the voice said. My voice. "Dinner's ready." "What are you doing with that?" Lily was screaming. Not a loud scream, but a quiet, terrified shriek. I raised the rifle. I knew this was insane. I knew it was hopeless. But I had to protect her. I had to fight. I closed my eyes, a single tear running down my face, and pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. The gunshot echoed through the house, a brutal, violent sound that shattered the perfect silence. I opened my eyes. The figures were gone, but there was something else. A small, dark stain on the floor where they had been standing. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. My whole body was shaking. I had done it. I had saved us. Then, I heard a voice. Not from the hallway. Not from the shadows. A soft, gentle whisper right beside me. "Don't be scared, Mom." I turned slowly. Lily was standing beside me, her eyes wide, her face pale, a small, thin smile on her lips, a smile that I had never seen before, a smile that didn't belong to her. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the small, dark stain on the floor. And then, I heard it, a voice, my voice, a soft, cold whisper coming from the living room. I heard it too, honey. I looked down at my hands, and I saw them. The blood. It wasn't the dark, thick blood of a living person. It was thin, watery, and it was all over my hands. I looked at the dark stain on the floor. It wasn't them. It was me. I had shot myself. And then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. A cold, tiny hand. I turned to look at my daughter. But it wasn't Lily. It was a perfect copy. A beautiful, empty-eyed replica. Her eyes were not filled with fear. They were filled with a cold, terrifying emptiness. And she was smiling. "We heard it too, Mom," she whispered. Her voice was not Lily's voice. It was a high, thin, hollow sound. And then I felt it. The house, the walls, the floorboards. They were breathing. And they were laughing. The voice I had heard. The voices I had feared. They were all around me. They were all a part of the house. And they were waiting for me. They had been waiting for me all along. The call was a trap. The perfect, loving, simple call for dinner. It was a lure, and I had fallen for it. and now I was a part of them. The laughter was all I could hear. The laughter of a house that had a new victim. The laughter of a mother who had just become the house's newest echo. The laughter of my daughter, who was no longer there. I looked at the window. The reflection was there. A woman, her hair wild, her eyes wide with terror, but her mouth was smiling. A cold, wide, empty smile. I had become one of them, and I would be waiting. For the next person. For the next call. The new flesh. It's been Liam for 29 years. I've always lived a quiet life. I work from home. I keep a small circle of friends, and I spend most of my time reading or watching old movies. You could say I'm a creature of habit, a man who likes things to be predictable. But my life is anything but. Every year on my birthday something happens, something my family calls the turning. I've been through it 28 times before, so by now I know the routine. The night before I get a strange restless feeling. It's not anxiety, but something else, a sense of unease, of a coming storm. I go to bed, tired but unable to sleep. I just lie there, in the dark, and wait. This year, it was my 29th birthday. My alarm was set for 7, but I was awake at 5. I got out of bed, a little stiff, a little sore. I felt different, taller maybe, lighter. My hands felt foreign. I went to the bathroom, and in the mirror I saw it, the change. It was never violent. There was no cracking of bones, no twisting of skin. It just happened, quietly, in the dark. The man in the mirror was a stranger. He had a face with sharp, angular features, a strong jawline, a scar over his left eyebrow, a thin white line that seemed to tell a story. His hair was a deep shade of brown. His eyes, they were still mine, the same tired hazel eyes I'd had my entire life. But the face around them was completely new. I ran a hand over my jaw. The skin felt smooth, the muscles firm. The scar felt real. I turned my head, examining my profile. It was all new. A new nose, a new mouth, a new person staring back at me. I looked at the man in the mirror. He was a complete stranger, but I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this was me now. This was who I was for the next 365 days. I had learned to live with it. My family, they understood. My mother said it was a curse, a genetic thing, a thing that ran in our family. It was always a whispered secret, a topic we never spoke about in the light of day, but it was there, a constant, unyielding truth. I put on my clothes, and they fit. A little tight in the shoulders, a little short in the sleeves, but they fit. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of coffee. As I stood at the counter, the smell of the coffee filling the room, I noticed something else, a small, almost imperceptible thing. I was standing on my right leg, with my left foot slightly turned in. It was a subtle limp, a habit I had never had before, a habit I couldn't control. My mind raced. Was this normal? Was it a side effect of the change? I took a sip of my coffee, and a strange, bitter taste filled my mouth. I had always hated black coffee, but this felt right. I took another sip, a craving, an alien need, and then a fleeting memory, a bright flash of a memory that wasn't mine, the scent of a woman's perfume, the sound of a city I had never been to, the feel of a cold steering wheel in my hands. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me with a profound, bone-deep sense of unease. I was no longer just a new person. I was a ghost, a lodger in a body that had its own memories, its own habits, and I had no idea whose body it was. The new body was a puzzle, a cruel, intricate one. I spent the day trying to figure it out. The man in the mirror was a few inches taller than I was last year, his shoulders broader. He had a slight limp on his right side, an almost imperceptible drag of the foot. It was a muscle memory I couldn't override. My hands, which had been clumsy just hours before, now moved with a strange, practiced grace. They knew how to hold a pen just so, how to stir a cup of coffee with a precise, circular motion. My old body, the one I had known for a year, was now a faded memory. I could barely remember the shape of my nose or the slant of my eyes. It was a terrifying realization. Every year, I didn't just get a new body. I lost the old one. Bit by bit, the memory of who I was vanished, replaced by a new persona, a new set of habits, a new set of memories. That night, my mother called. She always called on my birthday. her voice filled with a strange mix of dread and relief. "Everything go all right, honey?" she asked, her voice a little too cheerful. "Everything's fine, Mom," I said, a lie I'd been telling her for years. It was smooth. She seemed to relax. We talked for a while about her garden, about her quiet, predictable life. She never asked about my face, never mentioned the change. It was a silent agreement between us, a secret we both pretended didn't exist. It was easier that way. It was the only way. But this year was different. The cravings, the memories, they were too strong. I couldn't shake them. I found myself humming a tune I'd never heard before, the words to a song I didn't know on my lips. It was a chilling feeling, to be a stranger in your own mind, to have a ghost living in your head. A few days later, I was watching the news. I was a man of habit. Every day, at 6, I watched the news. It was a quiet ritual. The news anchor was talking about a car crash, a fatal one. The police were searching for a drunk driver. My blood ran cold. The man in the picture was me, the face on the screen, a chillingly perfect match to the face in my mirror. The same sharp features, the same strong jawline, the same scar, a thin white line over the left eyebrow. My heart hammered against my ribs. It couldn't be. It was just a coincidence, a terrifying, nightmarish coincidence. But then the news anchor spoke again. He gave the man's name, Colonel Jonathan Hayes, a decorated war hero. The news anchor spoke of his quiet retirement, his love for gardening, his passion for old movies. A new, terrifying thought took hold. My mind reeled. I was a man of logic, a man of reason, but this defied all logic. I looked at the man's picture on the screen. He was smiling, a quiet, contented smile, a smile I knew was now mine. My hands began to shake. I ran to the bathroom, and in the mirror, I saw it. The man from the news, Colonel Jonathan Hayes. His face was my face. My own memories, the ones I had cherished, began to fade. The memory of my own name, the memory of my own life. They were being replaced, erased, overwritten. The limp was his. The cravings were his. The memories were his. I was a ghost, a lodger in a body that was already a memory. A horrifying realization dawned on me. The curse, the turning. It wasn't a rebirth. It wasn't a new life. It was a theft. It was the taking of a life. And the lives I had been living for the past 28 years, they weren't mine. They belonged to others, others who had died. And I was wearing their faces, their bodies, their memories. The new flesh was born from the dead, and I was a living, breathing graveyard. My own reflection in the bathroom mirror was a ghost, a terrifying, beautiful ghost, Colonel Jonathan Hayes, a man who died just hours before I was born again. My hands, his hands, were trembling. The realization was a physical blow, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. The limp wasn't a side effect. It was an old war wound. The cigarette craving wasn't a strange habit. It was an addiction he'd carried for years. I was wearing his life, his memories, his sins. I had to know. I had to understand. I wasn't just a new person. I was a living grave, a walking corpse. I became obsessed. I spent days locked in my apartment, staring at my reflection, trying to find a piece of myself, a glimmer of the man I used to be. But he was gone, erased. The only way to find myself was to find him. I started with the news articles. They were a breadcrumb trail to a dead man's life. I learned his address, his favorite coffee shop, the park where he took his morning walks. I was no longer a man, I was a detective, a ghost haunting the life he'd stolen. My first trip was to his home, a small, cozy house with a sprawling garden in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was still filled with his things, his books on a bookshelf, his fishing gear in the garage, a photo on the mantelpiece of him smiling with a woman who looked at him with adoration, his wife. I felt a wave of guilt so profound it made me sick to my stomach. This man had a life, a real life, and I had taken it. I went to his favorite coffee shop. The barista, a young woman with a kind smile, looked at me, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Colonel Hayes," she said, her voice filled with a sad warmth. "We all miss you. Your coffee's on the house." I froze. She didn't see me. She saw him. I was a perfect imitation, a mask. I smiled. a shaky, foreign gesture, and took the coffee. It tasted like his memory. I walked to his park. The path was familiar, my feet, his feet, instinctively knowing the way. I sat on a bench and watched the world go by. The sun, the trees, the people. It was all a little too real, a little too perfect. A chilling thought came to me. Had he felt this? Had he felt a life that wasn't his? A life that was borrowed, that was fading away? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the news articles. I found an old blog he had written, a personal journal. His last entry was written just a few hours before his death. "I don't know what's happening to me," he had written. "I'm losing myself. My hands feel like they're not mine. My memories are fading. I feel a darkness, like someone is waiting for me. Like my time is up. I'm afraid." My heart hammered against my ribs. He had felt it. He had known. He had felt me coming. I wasn't just a new person. I was a ghost, a lodger in a body that was already a memory. My new flesh. It wasn't a gift. It was a curse, a horrifying parasitic curse. I ran back to my apartment. I looked in the mirror. I no longer saw the man's face. I saw my own face, the face I was born with. It was a new memory, a new face. I saw a long line of faces, a grotesque parade of the dead. I was the last one in the line. The next year I would be the first. The truth was a cold, brutal thing. It sat in my stomach like a stone. I wasn't Liam. I was a passenger, a collector of ghosts. For 28 years I had been wearing the faces of the dead. I had been living their memories, carrying their scars, their habits, their cravings. And every year, on my birthday, the cycle would begin again. The old body would die, and a new one would be born. A new ghost would take over, and I would be the living grave. I didn't call my mother. I couldn't. What would I say? I know what we are. We're a family of parasites. We're a family of killers. We're a family of ghosts? The thought was too unbearable. The silence was a cold, comforting blanket. It was the only way I could live with the truth. I spent the next year in a haze. I didn't work. I didn't go out. I just stayed in my apartment, watching the man's life unfold on a television screen, on the pages of a newspaper. I watched as his wife grieved, as his friends mourned. I watched my own reflection, and I saw a man who was no longer there, a man who was a memory, a man who was me. I became obsessed with time, the ticking of the clock, the passing of the days. I counted every single one of them, 365. The final terrifying countdown to my next rebirth, to my next theft. This year, it was my 30th birthday. I was no longer a man. I was a collector of ghosts, a walking grave. I had been waiting for this moment my entire life. I was not scared. I was not afraid. I was ready. I sat in my living room, in the dark, a single candle burning on the coffee table. I didn't have a cake. I didn't have a party. I just had the candle. And the clock. The clock on the wall read 3:26. 1 minute. 1 minute until the turning. I closed my eyes, and I waited. I was not waiting for a new face. I was not waiting for a new life. I was waiting for my old one, the one I was born with. I was waiting for the end. The clock read 3:27. A sudden, cold shiver ran down my spine. I felt it. The change. It wasn't violent. It was a soft, silent passing. The old body was fading. A new one was taking its place. The memories of the dead man were gone. The new memories were settling in. The new persona was taking over. I was a new man, a new ghost, a new him. I opened my eyes and I looked at my reflection in the window. The face was new. It was not the face of a man. It was the face of a boy, a young boy with wide, terrified eyes. I looked down at my hands. They were small, and they were shaking. I had been reborn, but I was not him. I was something else. And then I heard a voice, a small, trembling voice, filled with terror. It came from the television screen. It was me, a new ghost, a new him, the ghost of a boy who had just died. The television screen was playing the news. A young boy had just been killed in a car crash. The news anchor was talking about a hero, a man who had died saving him. I looked at the window. The reflection was there. A man, his face scarred, his eyes filled with a deep, terrifying sadness. He was not me. He was him, the man I had been for the last year, the man I had stolen, and he was watching me. He was waiting. He was the hero, and I was the one who had died. I was no longer the collector. I was the collected, and I was just the first in a long, long line. The cycle had a new rule. The victims would become the living, and the living would become the dead. And I was the first, and I would be waiting, waiting for the next victim, waiting for the next birthday, and waiting for my own face to be a ghost. The roommate. The decision to live alone was a conscious one. I'm an introvert, a quiet man in a loud world. I chose this old house because it was secluded, with a big yard and a porch swing that groaned like an old man settling in for the night. My only companion was my cat, Jasper. He was a black cat with a white paw, a little shadow that followed me from room to room. He was more of a roommate than a pet, really. He had his own routine, his own quiet ways. He was my peace. It was just after midnight. A storm had been brewing all day, and now the rain was coming down in a steady, rhythmic torrent. I was in bed, lying on my back, trying to settle. I had a long day ahead of me, and sleep was a precious commodity. Jasper was locked outside. I'd felt a pang of guilt, but he'd knocked over my favorite houseplant, and it was a mess. A night in the shed was a fair punishment for both of us. He needed to learn. I needed to sleep. I told myself he was fine. He was in his little shelter, warm and dry. He was probably annoyed, but that was okay. He'd get over it. My eyes were closed, my mind a blank slate. The sound of the rain was a lullaby, a soft, soothing hum that was slowly pulling me under. And then I felt it, a pressure, a soft, steady weight on the pillow behind my head. It was slow, deliberate, like a hand. My body went rigid. I froze. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't breathe. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic, desperate rhythm. It was a familiar feeling. A weight. A warmth. The kind of thing I would feel when Jasper would jump onto the bed, curling up behind my head. I told myself it was just the cat. He had to have found a way in. Maybe I hadn't latched the back door properly. Maybe he had crawled through a window. It was Jasper. It had to be Jasper. But the back door, I had double-checked it, I always did. The windows, they were all locked. I remembered the little click of the latch. The house was a fortress. Nothing could get in. Nothing could get out. The thought, a cold, sharp blade, cut through the calm. I was not alone. I was not alone. I didn't dare move. I just kept listening. My ears were straining, trying to pick up every sound. The rain, the wind, the groan of the old house. And then, after a few seconds, I heard it. A soft, gentle sound. The sound of a breath, a whisper of air, right next to my ear. It was slow. It was steady. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was human. A quiet, terrifying whisper of a breath. And it wasn't mine. My mind screamed. My body was an iron statue, a prisoner in its own skin. The thing behind me was breathing, and it was waiting for me to make a move. My breath caught in my throat. My body was an iron statue, a prisoner in its own skin. The pressure was still there, a soft, deliberate weight on the pillow behind my head. It was a terrifying, impossible warmth. It was so real, so tangible, that a small, desperate part of me still screamed that it was Jasper. It had to be. But the breathing was not Jasper. It was a slow, steady whisper of air, a sound that was too human to be an animal, a sound that was too close. The smell of something else, something I couldn't place, filled my nostrils. It was not the familiar scent of my home, of old wood and worn books. It was a cold, alien smell, like damp earth and dust. I couldn't move. My muscles were locked, my mind screaming at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was trapped in a bed that was a cage, a prison of my own making. The breathing grew closer. I could feel the whisper of air on my neck. It was a terrifying caress, a chilling, intimate touch. I closed my eyes, but it didn't help. The darkness was a blanket, a thick, suffocating blanket that was now shared with something else. The fear was a living thing, a cold, sharp blade that was slowly, impossibly, twisting inside my chest. I thought of Jasper, my loyal, predictable companion. He was locked outside. Safe. I prayed he was safe. I prayed he would stay outside. The sound of the breathing stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the sound itself. I knew it was waiting. Waiting for me to move. Waiting for me to show that I was awake. That I was aware. My mind raced. I had to get out. I had to run. I had to scream. But my body was numb. A puppet on a string. Its owner an unseen, terrifying thing that was waiting in the dark. And then, I felt it. A soft, light touch on my shoulder. A cold, long, slender finger. It was tracing a circle on my skin. A slow, gentle, horrifying caress. "You're not sleeping," a whisper said. The voice was soft. So soft. A sound that should have been comforting. A sound that should have been a lullaby. But it was not. It was a sound that came from a place so deep, so dark, so old. It felt like it had been there forever. My heart shattered. I was not dreaming. I was not alone. The house wasn't empty. It had a roommate, and that roommate was in my bed. I screamed. Not a loud scream, a silent scream. A scream that was trapped in my head. And then, I felt the hand on my shoulder. It was cold. It was real. And it was there. The voice was a whisper, a terrifying caress against my ear. "You're not sleeping." My body, a statue of terror, finally obeyed. My mind screamed, and with a desperate, ungraceful lurch, I rolled off the bed. My feet hit the cold hardwood floor. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I scrambled on all fours, a panicked animal, toward the door. I could feel it. The weight on the pillow was gone, the breathing had stopped. But I knew it was still there. It was watching. My hands, numb and shaking, fumbled for the doorknob. It was cold. So cold. I turned it, pulled the door open, and scrambled out into the dark hallway. I didn't bother with the lights. I didn't want to see. I just ran. Down the stairs, my feet missing steps. A jarring, clumsy rhythm in the silent house. I could hear it. The soft, rhythmic groan of the old house. The low, ominous whisper of the wind outside. But I could also hear something else. A sound from upstairs. A soft, deliberate thud. A sound of a weight being lifted. It was following me. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my lungs burning, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I stumbled into the kitchen and fumbled for the back door. The latch was cold and hard against my fingers. I fumbled with it, my hands too numb to work. Finally, with a desperate click, it opened. I burst out into the night, the cold rain a shocking torrent against my skin. I didn't care. I was free. I ran across the lawn, my bare feet sinking into the wet grass. I reached the shed. Jasper, my cat, was sitting on the porch, his back arched, his tail twitching. He looked at me, his eyes wide and yellow in the darkness. He wasn't purring. He wasn't meowing. He was just watching. He was looking at me, but he was looking at something behind me. I turned around. My house stood there, a dark, silent monolith against the storm. The lights were off. The windows were dark. Everything looked normal, so terrifyingly normal. The window to my bedroom was closed. The curtains were drawn. Nothing was there. Nothing. I stood in the rain, shaking, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I had to go back. I had to know. I walked back to the house, my legs trembling with every step. I entered the kitchen, the warmth of the house a terrifying contrast to the cold of the night. I went upstairs, slowly, deliberately. Every step was a thunderclap in the silence. I stopped at the door to my room. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. The room was dark. My bed was a black shape in the corner. I reached for the light switch. The lights flickered on, and the room was suddenly filled with a cold, unforgiving glare. I looked at the bed. The sheets were disheveled, a chaotic mess from my panicked escape. But on the pillow, there it was, a clear, distinct indentation, a perfect outline of a head, as if someone had just been sleeping there. I went to the bed, my mind a storm of questions and fear. The pillow was cold, but the indentation was still there. It was real. It wasn't a trick of the mind. It wasn't a nightmare. My eyes scanned the room. The closet door was ajar. The curtains were drawn. But everything was just as I had left it. I checked the windows. They were locked. I checked under the bed. Nothing. I went to the door and double-checked the lock. It was a fortress. Nothing could get in. Nothing could get out. A cold, new dread settled in my heart. It wasn't an intruder. It wasn't a ghost. It was something else. Something that had lived in my house. Something that had been there all along. A quiet, terrifying roommate I never knew I had. And it was waiting for me. It was waiting for me to go back to bed. My house was a tomb. It stood there in the night, silent and unmoving, a dark monolith against the storm. But I knew it wasn't empty. I was no longer afraid of a person breaking in. I was afraid of something that had never left. I was afraid of a guest who had overstayed their welcome. I was afraid of a roommate I never knew I had. Sleep was no longer an option. It was a luxury I couldn't afford. The moment I closed my eyes, I would feel it. The weight on the pillow, the whisper of a breath against my ear, the cold, slender fingers on my skin. I would wake up screaming, a silent, frantic scream that was trapped in my throat. I was living a nightmare, a waking, terrifying nightmare. I became a prisoner in my own home. I moved through the house in a haze of fear and exhaustion. I heard sounds when there should have been none. The soft creak of a floorboard from the hallway, a quiet giggle from the living room, the sound of a door that was opening and closing, opening and closing, opening and closing, a rhythmic, maddening rhythm. I would run to the source, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, but there was nothing there, just an empty hallway, a quiet room, a silent, unmoving door. I started to set traps. I placed glasses of water on the floor, hoping to hear the sound of a spill. I placed a bell on a string, hoping to hear a chime. Nothing. It was a ghost, a silent, methodical, terrifying ghost. It was a thing that moved without a sound. My mind began to unravel. I started talking to it, whispering into the dark. I know you're here. I know you're in my house. What do you want? But there was no answer. Just the silence. A cold, mocking silence that seemed to laugh at my fear. I had to know. I had to see it. I bought a set of night vision cameras and placed them in every room of the house. I set up a monitor in the living room and spent the night watching. Hours passed. The screen showed nothing. Just the empty rooms of my house, bathed in a strange monochromatic green. I was about to give up. I was about to turn off the monitor and go back to my empty, terrifying room, when I saw it. A flicker. A small, almost imperceptible movement in the corner of the screen. I froze, my eyes wide, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. It was a figure, a tall, slender figure. It was standing in the corner of my bedroom. It was watching me. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't an intruder. It was a thing of pure, black energy, a thing that had lived in my house, a thing that had been there all along, a quiet, terrifying roommate I never knew I had, a thing that had been waiting for me, and now it was in my bedroom, and it was waiting for me to go back to bed. I screamed, not a silent scream this time, a loud, terrified, primal scream that was trapped in my throat for weeks. I ran out of the room, out of the house, and into the night. I didn't stop running. I ran and ran and ran, until my lungs burned, and my legs gave out. I ran until I was no longer a man. I was just a living, breathing thing. A living, breathing thing that was a prisoner of its own fear. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that it was still there. It was still in my house. It was still in my room. It was still in my bed. It was still in me. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. My mind was a broken record, a single thought on repeat. It's in the house. It's in the house. I fell to my knees on the cold, wet pavement, the rain washing over my face. My whole body was shaking, a cold, empty shell. I was not a man anymore. I was a living, breathing thing. A living, breathing thing that was a prisoner of its own fear. And I knew with a terrifying certainty that it was still there. It was still in my house. It was still in my room. It was still in my bed. Days passed. I didn't go back. I slept in my car, in a state of constant, low-grade terror. I ate from a gas station. My mind a hollow shell. I called my friends, but I couldn't explain. There's a thing in my house, I would say. A thing that breathes. They would tell me I was tired, that I needed to rest. But I knew what I had seen. One night, The fear was gone. It was replaced by something else. A profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I was tired of running. I was tired of being afraid. I was tired of being a prisoner. I drove back to my house. The lights were out. The porch light was off. The house stood there, a dark, silent monolith against the storm. It was waiting for me, and I was ready. I went inside. The house was cold. The air was still. It smelled of dust and old books. The place felt empty. I walked to my bedroom, my feet a heavy, rhythmic thud on the floor. I opened the door. The room was dark. My bed was a black shape in the corner. I didn't bother with the lights. I didn't need them. I knew what was there. I walked to the bed. I lay down on my back. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My heart was a quiet, tired beat against my ribs. I closed my eyes, and I waited. I was not afraid. I was not scared. I was ready. The pressure came. A soft, gentle, familiar weight on the pillow behind my head. It was slow, deliberate. The whisper of a breath was right next to my ear. It was slow. It was steady. It was a sound that had been my living nightmare for days. But tonight, it was just a sound. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just lay there, a quiet, motionless statue. "I know you're here," I whispered. My voice, a soft, tired whisper. "I know you're in my house." The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. And then, I heard a sound, a soft, gentle chuckle, a laugh that should have been joyful, a sound that should have been happy. But it was not. It was a sound that came from a place so deep, so dark, so old. It felt like it had been there forever. And then, I felt it. A cold, long, slender finger on my chest. It was tracing a circle on my skin. A slow, gentle, horrifying caress. "I know," a voice said. A soft, chilling whisper that came from a place so close, it felt like it was inside me. "I know." And then, I felt a hand on my chest. A cold, heavy, inhuman hand. It pressed down. And then, I heard a whisper. A final, horrifying whisper, right next to my ear. "No," the voice said. "I'm not in your house. I'm in you." And then, I heard it. The sound of a breath. My breath. But it was not mine. It was a slow, steady, soft whisper of air. A sound that had been my living nightmare for days. But tonight, it was just a sound. The sound of a final breath. And the sound of a new roommate. A quiet, terrifying roommate I never knew I had. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that it was still here. It was still in my house. It was still in my room. It was still in my bed. It was still in me.